Okay, I think we are live. So welcome everybody to the Node.js security meeting. As usual, before start, does anybody have any announcement? Possibly one of the tasks we are going to discuss is also announcement about the CVEs. We are updating the end of life CVEs to include other versions, other end of life versions in the range. So if you get notified, that's possibly because you are using an end of life version. Um, okay, as usual, we go to the vulnerability review and then OpenSSF, oh, OpenSSF monitor review. Please include your name to the minutes. Okay, it's just missing mine. Um, let's go to the vulnerability review. We don't have any new issue since last meeting, so no updates this week. Um, from OpenSSF scorecard, we have a new update, right?
Sorry, was mute. Yeah, we have an update. Yeah, basically, let me set the PR. Yeah, this is the PR, 1450. You can see like the full details of the scoring and differences and deltas in the issue. 1449. Basically, the biggest challenge and the only actionable item that I see right now is regarding Node.js, who has a small decrease of 0.7 points because some changes on the GitHub actions that require to include the level of the permissions that probably was removed. So I will do a PR for that one.
Okay.
And I think aside of that, the rest is the regular discrepancies that we have between executions and so on. Also, take a note that this has been like the first report that we include in the last 2 months. So that's why you might see more discrepancies than other times, just because we didn't run it before.
So
Okay.
the note, like if it's basically that there's new tokens used in Node.js and something we didn't do in the best way, I think like I may have added that token. So and there's a process which is I think documented right here. I'm just putting that in the chat and I'll put it in
Yeah.
here. Like, so if there's something we should better document in there in terms of like, hey, how do we add a token? How do we request a token? That might avoid similar changes in the future because I'm like 80% sure I followed this and like added the token for no JIP if I'm remembering correctly. And next time I
Okay.
would just do the same thing if I don't know any better, right? So
I
if
see.
we can
Okay.
add something to this doc that says, and when you add the token, do this or whatever, that might help. But
Okay.
it's interesting that the automation found that and now we can fix it, which is really cool.
I will have a look. I think it's rather than a token. I think I say token, but actually I was mean to say like the permissions level.
Permission.
That
Yeah.
it's like if you have the permissions to read or write on the repo, so on the GitHub action itself. So probably it's missing in one of those. I mean, I didn't started to work yet in the PR, but yeah, I think that's the issue
Okay.
here. Probably just one of the updates or a new pipeline or something, just without the permissions tag probably.
Yeah, I wonder if there's anywhere like similarly, maybe there's somewhere we should try and document like if you're adding a new action, here's something to look out for or something
Yeah.
like that. But anyway, yeah, no, that's great. If you can take a look at and just, if it's just like, okay, based on the root cause, do we document somewhere something to help somebody avoid it? It's great that the automation will help us find it too. So,
Yeah, yeah, it will be nice. Also, maybe something to bring that to the step security team if they can, run the analysis preventive when you are doing a PR, so you
right,
can get, the typical like, hey, you're missing the permissions here. So rather than doing a mitigation, we can prevent it,
Yeah.
right?
right.
But yeah, that might be maybe that's not in their scope or roadmap at all. But yeah, I can ask them. I can
Okay.
talk with Ashish and ask him and see what happened. If not, worst case, we can do maybe something. Just do some fast analysis. You know what? A very simple JavaScript script for this, for the
Okay.
typical permissions and stuff like that. Sounds not super complex. So yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And okay. Anyway, whatever the outcome is, yeah. Maybe look to see if there's anything there or somewhere else. And like you
Yep.
said, even like a script that sounds good. But shows the value of having the scans in there for sure.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
Very cool. Um, Let me just say one thing. The list of repositories we are measuring contains some repositories that doesn't even being affected doesn't affect the Node.js binary or the distribution in general, right? For instance, the Node.js remark present linked node. I don't think we are still using that, or are we? I don't think so, to be honest. For instance, this repository I'm sending in the chat. If
But
you go to
shouldn't
the
we possibly look at like archiving the repo then? Like if we're really
yeah,
using it?
that's my feeling.
Yeah, right now it's tracked, so I can just do a PR and move it to exclude section of this config file, and from now on we
Mm,
just ignore it.
okay.
I mean, we remain with the
Uh,
historical data, but if there are any changes, we
Yeah,
don't
I think it
include it.
makes sense just because sometimes we will see like a low score value, but that repository wouldn't affect by any means the user or Node.js maintainer. So
Yeah, that's
maybe
true.
just to not be worried about the numbers, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you see any other repo that we can move, I mean, I see, for example, the TSC repo, which is not really maybe relevant for the build of Node.js and so on, but maybe
Yeah, but
we,
in some circumstance, for instance, if someone could, I know that the votes goes to the TSC repository. If
yeah,
someone could find a way to impersonate and do a vote, that might
mm,
be concerning.
that might be tricky. Yeah. Okay, okay, that's good. Okay, we'll do a PR for move remark present link node
Okay, I will
to
merge the
exclude.
request now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item in the agenda is the WDAC integration. They are almost done. This request is almost done. Like it's failing some specific tests, but I don't think this will be something that will take too long to conclude, to be honest. So now I think it's time to have a broader discussion around that. I know that Node.js already ships uh, some features that are environment specific. For instance, we are about to release process.execv, which is specific to Linux and Unix actually in general. And it won't affect Node.js, Windows users. And I'm wondering if someone might raise a concern in the future about releasing WDAC integration, which is totally specific to Windows. Uh, in my opinion, it's since it's a opt-in feature, I think it's totally okay. And we might want to have that discussion if we plan to enable it by default.
I think like I think the now, and correct me if I'm wrong, like is basically the API likely to be similar across I think they did some work to try and make the API similar, the same, regardless of whether it would be Windows or Linux, but the implementation is only Windows right now. Is that
Yes, the
accurate?
implementation is on Windows. The thing is that when enabled, any file system or any syscall to the file system from Node.js is affected. So, for instance, when you try to read from the env file, when you try to read from the config file, I think when you try to load some modules, that would also be impacted by this feature. But that's only on Windows. I think that's totally okay if you opt in to do that. But in the future, we might want to discuss if that's something acceptable to be stable.
I
Because
think, yeah, like a graduation criteria for sure. I kind of see security things like if the API is there and you can call it, but it just doesn't do anything, right? Like if as long as where I'd be worried is like, hey, here's an API in the API surface, and if you call it, if you run your application on Windows, it works, and you run it on Linux and it doesn't work.
Yes,
Like that's the problem for
would,
sure.
yeah, that would be the pattern, because
But in
you don't need to call API. You just need to, now when you pass the flag, it will enable it by default. So you don't need to call their API to block the access. They do
right,
it automatically, but that's
right.
fine
So
because it's opt-in.
right. So in this case, it's basically like your application can still run in both places. No problem. You don't have to change your
Yeah.
code. And that's what makes it for me like not as big an issue. It's like, yep, here's a Windows specific feature. It's all behind the scenes and you can get better behavior if you opt in on Windows. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I like that's the kind of one where I think there's some more flexibility, but I still think it should be included in the discussion of like what would the promotion criteria be, right? Like,
Yeah, I believe that we will never be able to enable it by default. Uh, as long as we don't have like a similar behaviors in Linux or in Mac OS, I guess. That's and also, yeah, I think that that's the case. That is like different from the permission model, because the permission model will break people. This WDAC integration might break people if they have the policy enabled. So it's not 100% sure that the behavior will change. Just one thing that we need to consider that is that all the Windows syscalls to that, for instance, whenever you try to read from a file, it will call the policy from Windows, and this call is synchronous. So it means that
right.
any file read or any module loading will have a event loop block at some point. Um, Again, if the user enable it, they know that it might happen. And but I also believe that this might make this feature not ready to be considered stable, because if users use that, they will lose a lot of performance and it might be totally not feasible to run it. Uh, I don't know. We still need to do measurements, of course, but
Yeah, but yeah, I think a bunch of those things could be in like exit criteria, and I think also like getting some experience of people using it, and it's always, but I think trying to like for these kinds of things, the more we can actually say like here are the actual exit criteria, the
mhm.
better, right? So like, after having that written down saying like to be a candidate for stable, it would be we want to see this, and this, right? Like we did that for the Node API, right? It's like, okay, we want to have so many people using it and whatever else.
Just lefting a comment there. Okay. I will ask also, let me see the request again. Then to review this conversation and then move forward. The CI is failing, but I think it's this feature is almost ready to go, and I don't think that someone would object that at this point. Okay, moving on to the Node.js security working group repository. The first one is update on, actually there's another one that I have included to the agenda that I need to update the minutes. I think this will be a very fast discussion. This one is, remove Node.js stack in favor of Node.js org feed. I raised that that idea because when I was doing the security release, I was wondering that how many people were following that and why we are using this mechanism as a duplicate of our Node.js blog. And I believe that a lot of security researchers sees that. To be honest, in my opinion, I don't think Node.js developers or developers that maintains Node.js in their companies, they watch that conversation. I don't think so. But still, I believe we have some folks that watch, and I think we can't remove that, right?
Yeah, we've definitely had people who were like, hey, why didn't you publish there when we missed it? So like I think that we've had definite feedback, and it may not be developers, but I think people who like deploy systems, they use that as a good way to say like, okay, when it's very low volume. So like if there's a message from there, I pretty much know it means there's a security release, and therefore I need to do something.
Okay. So the next step would be automating that. And of course, I will close this issue, closing this issue as we will proceed with the auto with the Google group message automation as part of security release. Okay. The next one is update on CVs for end-of-life release lines, meet removal, and next steps. So this is a tracking issue. We have opened the issue to track the process. We have also published a blog post to inform users about what happened and what we are going to do next. And then Marco is working to update the CVs to also include end-of-life release lines. He opened a pull request, right, Michael? On security.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm on the train, so the connection is quite shaky. So I'm my best to
Okay.
answer.
So I guess like Marco, like you said, he opened a PR to open it in the database that's in the security working group repo. I assume the next step would be to also update the CVs in HackerOne or something like
Yeah.
that.
So I talked with HackerOne people. The way that they want, like, there is not a standard procedure to update all the CV. They want basically a file, a CSV with all the information. So like we can make the script produce this CSV. So it's consumable by humans, which is
Okay.
us and HackerOne.
Yeah, I think the CVE that we have on that request is the CVE that we are going to send to them. And that's
Yes.
how they are going to update. So I left a comment, but I think Marco fixed my concern, and then I need to
Yes.
review it again.
Yeah.
So and also if you all want to review that would be very good. Just make sure that we are one thing that we need to make sure is that we are including end-of-life versions that were end of life in the moment we issued the CVEs. Okay, great. The next one is the OpenJS security compliance checker. Basically, I was talking with Rude as part of the Alpha Omega initiative, and basically he collected most of the best practice documents plus scorecard and created this with Ulysses, the security compliance checker. Basically, it's a list of checks that is meaningful for big organizations like us to guarantee that we are following some basic or sometimes not so basic, not so trivial secret policies, and make sure that we are not missing anything. So I opened this issue. I basically got everything from the CSV from the spreadsheet, and I put in the issue. And I suggest if we can do that asynchronously, and also during the meetings as a deep dive to solve some of that. So I suggest to us if we can take just the one user authentication today, and then we can do it gradually in the next meetings. Does that sound good?
I think Ulysses, you've already also been working on some automation or something, right? Related to these? Is that something we might
Yeah.
think of here too?
Yeah, let me share a link of that. Oh, I think I lost the link. Let me see. Yeah, so I've been working in something called Open Pathfinder, which is like an organization in GitHub that has two different repositories. One is Vision Board, which is like the tooling for this checklist. Basically, we evolved from this CSV to try to make it something more automated. That's the idea. So for example, you have the CSV like digested here. So you can see a little bit more like the full checklist here. So the idea that we are trying to do with this in terms of tooling is try to make a tool that actually can run these checks for you, right? There are some stuff that might don't have that option, right? Because there are manual checks or require some input from the teams or the project, but there are other checks that we can do. For example, do we have branch protection on every single repository in the organization? These kind of things, right? So yeah, it's work in progress. I mean, there is a lot of checks missing at this stage, but yeah, we are working on this. Also, we are working in a separate tool called ForteSphere, which the idea is helping you to make the changes using the GitHub API directly. So for example, if you need to enable branch protection on every repository using the GitHub UI, you have to go on every repo and do it. But if you do this, you can just, do it all at once, like very similar to Terraform approach, but without the overhead of Terraform, basically, and not with the granularity and so on, right? So the idea is just to attack the API and help. But yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of work in progress. But if you are checking for information on some of these checks, you have like a full detailed information on every one of those here. So for example, if you go for enforce multi-factor authentication, so you have like a detailed view here, and also if it's implemented or not in the tool, and what's the state and how we calculate it, and so on. So yeah, that's more or less the status, like a quick guide, quick summary.
So I guess it's like, is it ready enough to run? Like instead of us manually going through all these things, my question is like, should we run it and see what it tells us? Is that
I
easy to
can run
do?
it,
Is it
but most of the stuff that is implemented are the checks that are manual. So for example, the ones that are related to NPM and these kind of things, we can write manual. A lot of the automated ones are not yet there.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not gonna short circuit it for us yet.
Not yet, not yet. But
Okay.
if you want to have an idea on how this work on here, basically on the website, you have like a small 10-minute video kind of thing demo. So in both cases, like how this work and how you get the output and everything's supposed to run. I mean, it's designed to run locally on one of the maintainers machines, so you don't have to set your
Yeah,
credentials or whatever. But yeah, you need like a high level permission level token from
right.
GitHub, basically, that can read admin level just for the settings and stuff.
Yeah, I was just like, hey, if we could run it and not have to go through things, but it
Yeah.
sounds like that's not going to solve the problem yet. Still work in progress. So yeah, so back to
Yeah.
Raphael's suggestion, like, yeah, let's just start working through the section. So
Yeah, but anyway, for the next meeting, I can run it and show you the report so you can have an idea of
okay,
what is there, and also to collect some feedback from all of you and see how useful or not it is, because we're in a stage of rethinking a lot on the UX, UI, and so on. So yeah,
okay,
fantastic.
that's
Thank you.
good.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you can run it in the next meeting, so we
Yeah.
can get more an overview on how it's gonna work. I'm also looking forward to contribute to it, because I think that would help us if we make it consistent enough or flexible enough for Node.js.
Yeah. Thank
So
you.
user authentication. The first one is multi-factor authentication enforced across the GitHub organization. I have checked that, and I've also confirmed that with Michael Targos, actually, Michael Zazos. And yes, we do have enforced MFA to the GitHub. And the next one is across the NPM organization. Should we take in consideration the PK.js or just the Node core
I think it
package?
would need to be all orgs owned by like, so, node private and PKGS.
Okay.
I mean, do we not have it turned on for PKGS? I think
I don't know. I just asked it because I don't know where to start. Let me see if I have access to, because I know that the Node core we choose just one account has access to, which is the
Yeah.
Node bot. So I don't know if we can check that easily without having username and password and logging into that account.
Yeah, we'd have to go and confirm that unless there's some way where it shows us check npm check if 2FA is enabled.
Yeah, you have to do that via the website. You cannot bring that info from the API.
Who is the best point of contact, or where I should open an issue or
You
ask for that?
can contact. I have a discussion about it on the npm channel because I was actually thinking on how to do the implementation for this one. Yeah, let me see. Here it is. So we have a discussion. I think Gar confirmed it as well. Like, what is the current approach? And yeah, it's a protected information. So even if you have if you are logged in, you cannot use the API to retrieve information about your second factor authentication. So
Okay.
you need to go like on the UI.
Right. And in the Node.js organization, Michael, do you know the best person to contact that would have access to it?
I'm sure build team has access. What I'm wondering is if
Yeah.
do we have a PKGS organization in like we have, so there's
We have the
GitHub
GitHub one.
repos. So we have 3 GitHub repos, but do we actually use a different organization to publish the npms from PKGS? I'm not sure about that.
Let me see exactly the npm package. Yes, we do have our organization PKJS, but I don't know if that falls in the
Do you have an
Node.js.
example package? Just like where's
Yes,
the, okay, there we
just
go.
sent in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay, so right. And who is, so basically, but the collaborators there,
Our
like
Node.js
I see the
Foundation
Node.js Foundation account,
and Todd.
and
Yeah, and
then, yeah,
Wes.
okay.
Yeah.
And Wes.
Probably we can ask Wes how is the settings for this.
Okay, so for NVJS, for PKJS, we can ask.
So, and that's actually an org, right? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. Like I can log in as the Node.js Foundation.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
could probably figure that out. Like I'm assuming we added the Node.js Foundation account as an admin.
Possibly.
So I
And
guess I can take the action to log in and see if I can see if it's turned on.
okay. And also please check the Node core organization, which is the one that we have created recently to run.
Yeah, which one is that?
This is the one that we are publishing the Node core issues, which is keep
Right.
node land and things like that. But I'm not sure about changelog maker. I think, let me see. Yes, changelog maker is not under any org, I believe.
Right. Who's the, yeah, because we're publishing not under orgs for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. So this is changelog maker. I'm sending the chat. I don't know if we should. I think it doesn't fall in our checks because it just says about organization, right? And we also have the branch Jeff.
Yeah, so I can just look at those and see that they are, yeah. So yeah, I think they can also be enabled. Can it be enabled per project too? I think. I think it probably can.
Yes.
This is where it gets to be a bunch of work, right? Like, and I know where Ulysses, it would be great to have a validation.
Yeah, I think that that's the 30 check, which is we have one check for NPM MFA in the NPM organization, and we have a check for MFA in all tools, which would be like changelog maker and branch diff, I guess.
One note on this, I was discussing this with Ruth because we are thinking on making like the version 2 of this. Well, I was doing the implementation of the checks, we preview some of these. So probably this check might be removed from the next version of this because it's a little bit ambiguous, because it's like, yeah, multi-factor authentication on every tool, like which tools? Like, I mean, the amount of
Yeah.
tools that we have is huge, and keeping a track on that is complicated, right? I mean, if you ask any maintainer, they will tell you yes, but it's like on every single tool that you own, like, do you have second factor authentication on Vercel? Do you have it in, I don't know, do you have it in Slack? Do you have it in, there are like too many things ongoing on your social media accounts, on, I don't know,
Well,
depends
that's a
on,
different, that's even a different issue, right? Like that there's, see, enforced in all tools is, does the tool force you to have that second thing? Which is completely different from whether 2FA has been like this enforced across an NPM organization. Okay, I can go check our two organizations, but that doesn't actually, what about the tools that aren't under organization?
yeah.
Right? Like, and what's that list? The org is kind of easy, right? Like I can go and that'll take me not too much time. But if you then say, well, all of our other NPMs, like, do they have it turned on? Then we have to have the whole list. Then I have to go look at all those. So that ends up being more work on its own. But that doesn't even cover the next one, which is like, does the tool, when I run changelog maker, does it require me to have a second 2FA thing, right? Like some of them you would say like, well, okay, if GitHub requires it, then the tool requires it, right? But yeah, I
Yeah.
don't, yeah, in terms of like answering that again becomes a hard one. So like it's almost like you need, yeah, like what do we do? What's the answer for the second one if we're not using an organization?
We can use the yellow, which is non-applicable.
Hmm.
But we have an organization, so right, like we'll check those. Those ones we can check is good, but the
Yeah.
other ones, it's like I don't think the intention is to just ignore those, right? Like there's probably like, so maybe there needs to be another one, or it needs to imply like if you don't use an org, you need to do something, or
I think that if you don't use an org, I think it goes to the third one, which is in all tools,
no,
which
I think that's completely different. Like I think that basically says you in the tool itself, when you run it, you have 2FA, not when you like for the one above, it's like access to NPM and ability to publish. And so basically, the ability to push out a new version of the tool is controlled through 2FA. I read the next one as when I run the tool, I need 2FA to be able to do whatever I'm doing, right? Like, and that has nothing to do with publishing it. So that's
Hmm.
where I kind of see it being completely different.
Okay, okay, okay.
And it is like I think Ulysses said, it's kind of complicated too, because like some of the tools,
They do have it.
like what does it mean for the tool to enforce it if the tool is mostly going against GitHub, right? Like really it's like
Yeah.
the tool itself doesn't make up any info. So like maybe that one doesn't make sense. It's more like the resources you have. Like I could see one that says for GitHub, 2FA is enabled, right? Which is the first one. So as long as we do
Yep.
that, and if all the tool does is it queries against GitHub, well, the tool doesn't need to do anything, so it doesn't make any sense. So I think based on that, you're kind of suggesting we ignore 3, right?
Yeah, probably we will ignore 3 or reformulate it somehow in the next version. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was very ambiguous to figure
right.
out. Yeah.
And then even for like 2, it's like I can check it for an org, but that doesn't answer it for all the individual packages necessarily. And for that, we'll need a list of packages. And
Yeah.
Okay.
anyway, I'll take the action to check on the orgs if there's like a setting that says enforce it. And I suspect the answer will be yes. I also won't be surprised if for our non-scoped ones, like NPM seems to be forcing that on you for a bunch of things, but like that gets back to like, hey, we need a whole list of them, and then somebody has to look at it manually for each one, and that could end up being with quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
All right. Can we move to the 4?
Yep.
Use multi-factor authentication methods that defend against impersonation when available. I have no idea what this means.
Yeah, me too. Like that's kind of like that implies we understand the details of like it implies to me like some multi-MFA methods don't defend against impersonation, but I don't know which ones those would be or what the
Yeah, let me see what discussions we have around this.
Maybe yes. I think your interpretation might be correct, Michael. In some cases, multi-factor authentication could be like via SMS, and as far as I know, SMS is not safe.
mm,
I think it needs to be like to be
yeah.
useful, it needs to be more specific, right? Like you can't have each project figuring
Okay.
out which is the useful set. It should be, MFA does not use SMS, does not use blah, does not use
Yeah.
Y. Like,
Okay. So I'll instead of adding the yellow check, I will add the dash and also crop the message.
what's the
Uh,
dash mean? Like
Yeah. A question
uh,
mark.
maybe a question mark. Question mark would be good. It's like, or
Yeah, we
separate
okay.
can pick
question
that.
marks. It's like, yeah, we don't know what to do with this one, right?
Yeah, that's also tricky, right? Because I was thinking like, yeah, the SMS example is great, but depends on the provider, right? So for example, in Apple, when you need like the keys for the certification, stuff like that, they only provide you the option to use SMS, right? So technically it's like when it's available. So in this case, it's like, yeah, we try our best, but we have to use SMS. So that's okay. And if they change the rule like in 6 months, which nobody noticed, then it's like you are not compliant, but you are not aware of, right? We are not checking like if they enable now a new way to do second factor authentication. So then now it's something that they have to do, right? So I think also it's quite ambiguous or
Yeah, and I
hard
think
to.
like the value add that the foundation like could provide is the more specific guidelines of figuring out, well, which ones
Hmm.
are reasonable. Like, it could be the thing could be like when available and or maybe it would be more specific, like avoid using these types of multi-factor authentication when possible, right?
Yeah.
And it's like SMS is maybe the good example or something else. I don't know, whatever, but like,
Okay. Um, right. Next one. Oh, I lost.
Yeah. SSH keys, I think.
Yes, use SSH keys for developer access to source code repository and use a passphrase.
It's tricky. I mean, I was exploring this when trying to do the implementation. And the problem I found, which I'm not a crypto expert at all, right? So it might be like going too far. But yeah, there is not an easy way to know if an SSH key using the public key has a passphrase associated with that, right? So it can be that someone has like the SSH key, like I mean, the developer has the private key, but you don't have any way to check using the public key if that person use a pass key to protect the private key.
We don't even do that in the first, like we don't even use SSH keys, I don't think.
We recommend him like for accessing to the infra resources and stuff. There is like the way on how to get the keys, and there is a recommendation. I mean, a must of use a passkey to protect them on your machine.
But this says to access source code repository. So like I'm interpreting this as access to GitHub.
Oh, when we do the clone of private stuff and things like that, right? You
Right.
have
Or
the
when we commit
option.
PR. So like I guess I'm not, that's
Yeah,
the way I read it, right? It says developer access to source code repositories, and we don't force people to use SSH keys to do any of that.
yeah. Also,
Um,
GitHub allows to do HTTPS, right? So you can just download it. I mean, you can use
right.
both.
So I again, this one is kind of like,
I think that you are
okay,
not.
is that practical? Like, I'm not even sure it is, right? Like, to be useful, it would be like,
Yeah.
and have they, like, what projects actually do this? Are there some? I don't
Probably
know.
the ones that don't use GitHub as a source
Sure,
code.
Yeah.
okay.
But yeah,
Right,
that's not anyone in the foundation right now, right? As far I know, unless
right.
someone has like a private Git instance, whatever, right? I mean, or a super legacy project that was built before GitHub, for example, or using a different provider, like a Gitty or a
So being
GitLab
very
custom
much more
instance. I don't know.
specific, like, if not using GitHub, blah,
Then,
then I
yeah,
would just say ignore.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Maybe something like if you use GitHub, just ignore. I mean, like applicable.
Yeah,
You mark as done, right?
yeah. If not using GitHub, for repositories outside of GitHub or GitLab, maybe.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's also. I will have a meeting with Root today, and I will mention that it doesn't make much sense in our or it's not clear enough for us at least,
Yeah.
what this implies and what security risks actually. Uh, Moving on, we have the github.com use passkey AAL2 or hardware key to activate password biometrics. I didn't know that it was possible when I. How can we do that? And
Yeah,
when
like what's again, it's back to the initial reaction of like, is the foundation going to buy everybody hardware tokens?
yeah,
They figured out how practical this is. Like,
Yeah.
what's the point of saying this when we're going to be like, how do we do this? Is this,
okay.
which projects actually do this would might be interesting, or I don't.
Yeah. And also
I
it's
think
hard to
in
ensure, like one of the challenges is also like you're supposed to check this for all the people who has access to the repos, right? I assume, like with the right permissions or whatever. So then it's like not only having the keys, also being sure that the people are using those. So that is even harder.
Yeah, that's a good point. My one is like, is it even reasonable for an open source project to do this, right? Like, if it is reasonable, then like you could make the ask, and then you get to like, well, how would we enforce it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and like, are there like, what would, I don't know, is there anything that goes behind some of these, like that says this is a common practice, right? Like, how many of the OpenJS projects actually use hardware things now? And I think my guess is zero.
I mean, like using hardware keys.
Yeah.
I use them, for example, but
Yeah. Okay.
but I inherit this habit from Google, so that's a full different history. But yeah, I
So
use
you
the
have like
typical
an
two
AL,
cookies.
you have an AAL2 hardware key that you use.
Not sure if technically it's LLL2 or 3 or 4 or whatever's the name, but yeah, physical USB keys, definitely. I'm use them.
So, but is that what this is talking about?
I think is that one, like these Chupico keys or something like that. So
Right.
you have these pen thumbs that you touch or whatever
Right.
physically. So I mean, they are not reading your fingerprint or whatever,
Right.
just physically touch, right? So I think maybe that's the difference between 2 and 3, and the 3 is the one that actually reads your fingerprints or something like the crypto wallets or stuff like that. I don't know.
Does yours actually, like I have one, which we use for my Red Hat stuff, but it doesn't require a password or
No,
biometrics.
just touching, right? Yeah, I have that
Right.
one too.
So
Yeah, the
like
ones that you touch.
that doesn't meet this requirement. It's basically some sort of hardware that's going to require a password unlock or a fingerprint scan. So I'll go back to like
I see. Okay, because
I
it's
don't think you meet the
biometrics.
requirement
Okay,
either, right? Like
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I
so it's
see. It's
kind of
not.
like yeah,
Yeah, it's not something. I mean, because password is something that you know, and these keys that we have is something that you own, right? So that's the
right.
next step. But this is something that is belong to you, like biometrical check, right? So that's
Yeah.
the next level. Okay. Yeah. Then
It's
then.
still like, it's good in the sense of like you need your password for GitHub, right? And then you've got the
Yeah.
token. So like you need two things, right? Something you have and something you know.
Yeah. That's
But
the
this goes the
multi-factor, right?
next,
The basic. This go a
yeah,
different level. Yeah.
this goes like a whole nother level. And I'm like, my first
Yeah.
question is this even practical for an open source project? Like that, what thought has gone into that in terms
Yeah.
of like just because
I don't
like
know. Yeah.
where's the project that is doing this?
Yeah, and also how to check that, right? Because I mean, as soon as someone has multi-factor authentication on GitHub, which is something that you get with
Yeah.
an SMS, is like for me, I mean, that all the people have the same level, even if you use biometrical key of just an SMS.
But
I
I
mean, you
guess
don't
I'm
have a
more
way to audit.
fundamental that like if we can't point to some open source project that's doing this that we know of, and preferably in the
Yeah,
foundation already, why are we even recommending it? Like it doesn't seem like we figured
yeah,
out whether it's practical for us to do it, right? Like it'd be better to say
yeah,
like I can understand like we think we should do this, but to help projects do it is you need more than just saying you can do this thing that nobody does.
yeah.
Right?
That's true, and
Right?
also brings also a new level of difficulties for bringing new collaborators, right? I mean, not everybody has a
Right.
biometrical device, right? I mean, or a laptop that has this
Right.
fingerprint reader, right? So you're using a VM, whatever, right? So it's
Right.
even harder. So yeah, I don't think it's an easy recommendation. Maybe we can just skip those three, which for
Yeah.
me are very similar variants of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
Yeah. Because like it would be like I think we can say no. Like maybe that's the thing. We don't do any of those.
yeah, not
But like and we
interested.
don't know we
Yeah,
also don't know how we would do them and
yeah,
like
I
or
how
have
how to
to
enforce
included
it.
and
then I've included then as non-applicable because I mean, even though
Hmm.
we could do that, in our situation is it's impossible due to the amount of contributors and
Yeah,
like considering we need to buy it to people and what about people that lose their
yeah.
hardware keys and things like that, what's gonna do? I feel
Replacements.
that
Yeah,
yeah, I feel that for
yeah.
us it's just non-applicable, but in any case, I will talk with Ruud today to watch what we have
Mhm.
discussed. So he knows exactly
yeah.
if that document makes sense, and maybe in the next session, I will ask him to join, so we
Yeah,
could debate it.
Yeah, I
that's
wouldn't say
good.
it's not applicable. I'm more like we wouldn't know how to do this and we would need much more support to move in this
Yeah,
direction. Maybe it's easier than we think, right? But like in absence of enough support guidance, like somebody explaining, oh no, don't worry. This is really easy to
yeah,
do. Just do this. Or maybe like
Uh-huh.
maybe it just means our phones, which are actually okay, right? Like to get into my phone where I have the authenticator, I kind of doubt it, but like,
Yeah.
like we need help understanding how as an open source project this could happen because like we don't know and
Yeah.
our gut feel is like we can't, but like I don't want to say we're just ruling it out. It's just like the recommendation is
Yeah.
we don't know where to go with it.
Yeah, I think also like on how we read this compliance checker list probably is more something like big wins, rather because I think like having this biometrical key is like from going to 97% security to 120% security, but
Right.
from 0 to 80, you just go with multi-factor authentication, right? So you already make
Yep.
it harder. So maybe that's the kind of things that we can focus on, just simplify, because thinking on, for example, solo maintenance project also is a painful experience if you try to achieve all of these, right? So maybe just going with a lean version of this list for the version 2 of this list might be a good option as well. I'm
I
thinking also that I will replace maybe the column of the IDs later on today to include the IDs that I'm using on the tool, because otherwise it's going to be a little bit misleading. And in that list also I will include the link to the documentation that they have, which include also the links they use here like Mitre and CVEs and stuff, so it's easier for the discussions. And maybe I will include an additional column for the issues that I have where I'm discussing this with Ruth, so we can also comment on those. So that way we can, organize a little bit more the feedback in a structured way for the version 2.0. If that makes sense to all of you.
that makes sense to me because I
Okay.
totally agree. Like the first two are like, easy to implement and is a big win, right? So like
Yeah.
the risk I think is like once you get into all the others, then people are like, well, I'm less interested going through the rest of the things, right? Where if it was just the
Yeah.
first two and you go, yep, check, we understand, let's validate, good. But once you get into these others where you're like, well, these don't make like, are they practical? Like, are they going to help us do it? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
having like a, hey, here's the ones we recommend, which are doable is much better than like, oh, well, we're going to fail all of these. So like, well,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. So I'll pass the feedback forward. And yeah, thank you for joining. I don't think we have any time to discuss the other items. So thank you everybody for joining. Hope to see you.